Hello children, how are you doing? I hope you all are doing fine. So let's start a new topic, friction. And aim to learn is to know about friction, factors affecting friction, friction, unnecessary evil and increasing friction, causes of friction, types of friction, ways to reduce friction and fluid friction. So let's start with warm-up exercise. A cell is rolled down and inclined plane first on a smooth table and then on a cloth piece. So you have to do accordingly. Let's proceed further. You have read in the previous chapter that friction is a contact force that tends to stop a moving object and also tends to stop a stationary object from moving. Let us now study friction in detail. Friction, it is considered as an example when a ball is rolled on the ground. It stops after traveling a finite distance. Similarly, when we stop paddling a bicycle, it gradually slows down and finally comes to a stop. It is the force of friction between the surface of the wheels of the bicycle and surface of the ground that opposes the motion of the bicycle and brings the bicycle to rest when we stop paddling it. This force acting along the two surfaces in contact which opposes the motion of one body upon the other is called the force of friction or frictional force or simply friction. Frictional force comes into play only when two surfaces are in physical contact and is therefore a contact force. The two important properties of friction are friction always opposes motion and friction produces heat. Direction of force of friction. Can we move on a bicycle along a leveled street without using our legs? If so, we know that we continue to move it for a while even though we have stopped pedaling the bicycle. But do we keep on moving forever? Our experience tells us that the answer of this question is no. We finally come to stop since we are no longer exerting a force by pedaling. It is the force of friction that prevents the box from moving initially. We have to apply sufficient force to overcome friction before the box starts moving. Here also the force of friction acts in a direction opposite to the direction in which the object tends to move. If we push from left to right, the force of friction acts from right to left and vice versa. The given activities show that the force of friction always opposes the motion of an object. Activity time. Aim to do these activities show the force of friction prevents stationary objects from moving until the force applied is greater than the force of friction. Procedure is that to push a heavy box and try to move it from left to right direction. See the picture. It doesn't move when you apply a small force on it. Now increase the force until it starts moving. Now move the box from the opposite side and try to move from right to left. Observation and conclusion. We can see that box moves when we increase its force. Causes of friction. If you see the texture of any surface with a microscope, it might be possible that you find some irregularities present in it. These irregularities in the form of grooves and ridges present on the surfaces in contact. You may try to look at the piece of sandpaper through a magnifying glass and see the irregularities present on its surface. The irregularities of two surfaces in contact get interlocked. To make an object set in motion, one has to overcome these irregularities and apply a force equal to the frictional force. When one surface moves over another, these grooves and ridges interlock with each other. This interlocking of the surfaces forbids further movement, giving rise to friction. Science fact is tribiology is the branch of science that deals with the study of friction. Factors affecting friction. Frictional force depends on two main top factors, the nature of the surfaces in contact and the weight of the sliding body. Nature of the surface. Friction is not same for all the surfaces. Friction between the surfaces in contact is less for the smooth surfaces and more for the rough surfaces. More the roughness of a surface, larger is the number of irregularities on its surface and hence greater will be the friction. Weight of the body. A heavier object will press harder into the irregularities, so there will be great resistance of motion. That is greater friction. This is the reason why we find it difficult to move heavier objects. It is important to note that the force of friction does not depend upon the surface area of two objects which are in contact with each other. Frictional force is self-adjusting in nature. It is important to note that the force of friction is self-adjusting. It is automatically adjusts itself to the applied force. As the applied forces increase, the force of friction also increases proportionately. However, the force of friction cannot go on increasing infinitely. There is always some maximum limit to it. When the applied forces increase further, the body begins to move in the direction of applied force. Types of friction. On the basis of its nature, frictional force can be divided into three types. They are static friction. The force of friction come into play which does not allow two bodies to slide upon one another is called static friction. It is self-adjusting force, that is only as much of it is come into play as it is necessary to prevent the motion. Static friction increases linearly with the applied force and its maximum value is known as limiting friction. Dynamic friction or sliding friction, the force of friction acting between the two bodies when these are sliding upon one another with a uniform speed is called dynamic friction or sliding friction. Rolling friction, the force of friction existing between the two surfaces in contact when one of them is rolling over the other is called rolling friction. The resistance of motion of a ball rolling on a floor is an example of rolling friction. Experimentally, it has been proved that static friction, sliding or dynamic friction, rolling friction. Activity time aim to show that rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, and as you have seen that static friction is smaller than sliding friction or dynamic friction. So materials required is a thick book, cylindrical pencils, 3 or 4. Method is follow the steps given flow, place the book on the table and push it to slide, feel how much forces is required to push it. Place 3 or 4 cylindrical pencils on the table parallel to each other. These pencils are acting as rollers. Now place the book over these pencils are shown in the figure. Push the book by ticking it and the book moves easily. Result is the book move easily when placed on cylindrical pencils or rollers. Conclusion, rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction. Friction are necessary evil. There are instances in our daily life where friction is a necessity. For example, without friction we cannot hold objects in our hands. We cannot walk and cannot light a matchstick. Sometimes friction is not desirable. For example, friction between machinery parts causes wear and tear. Since friction is advantageous to us, it is considered as a friend, but due to its disadvantages, it is a foe. Depending on the circumstances, friction can be a help or a hindrance. Thus, it is necessary evil. Advantages of friction between our feet or footwear, and the ground helps us to walk without slipping. That is why it is difficult to walk on ice or on a smooth polished floor. It would not be possible to light a matchstick without friction between its head and the side of a matchbox. Cars and buses are able to run on roads because of friction between the tires and the road. Without friction, writing on paper would be impossible as the top of the pen will slip on paper. Nails and screws hold the wooden boards and walls together due to friction. The application of brakes to stop a cycle, scooter or car, etc. is possible only due to the friction between the brake lining and the rim drum of the wheel. Disadvantages of friction. Friction causes wastage of energy. This is because to move a heavy object, a lot of energy is utilized in overcoming the friction. Friction results in wear and tear of parts that rub each other. For example, the shoes of soles of our shoes and the surface of tires of vehicles. The moving parts of a machine wear out with time due to friction. Friction wears out the brake pads of vehicles gradually. As a result, that brake pads of vehicles have to be replaced quite often. Friction generates heat. The moving parts of a machine produce a lot of energy which gets lost in the surroundings. This unwanted heat can damage and reduce the efficiency of machines. Arrangements have to be made to cool down fast moving machines to avoid damage. Cars have a cooling system to keep the engine cool. Ways to reduce friction. Basically, friction is caused because of the interlocking irregularities of two surfaces. Thus, if the irregularities are minimized, the friction will get reduced. Following are the methods employed for reducing friction. By polishing the surfaces, polishing a rough surface smoothens it and reduces friction. Polishing removes hills and valleys from the surfaces. Therefore, polishing of the surfaces reduces the friction. Number 2, by streamlining the body or an object. A streamlined shape is narrow in front and back and broader at the middle. Bodies of aeroplane, rockets, ships, etc. are streamlined. Birds and fishes also have streamlined bodies. Wheels. Number 3, if a suitcase is fitted with wheels, it is easier to move it because the friction between the wheels and the ground is less. Thus, wheels reduce friction. Thus, rolling friction is less than sliding friction. Ball bearing or roller bearings, they are made in various designs to reduce friction. They reduce friction because rolling friction is smaller than sliding friction, and these bearings are also replicated to further improve their function. By using fine powders, graphite is very soft solid which can be ground to a very fine slate, which fine state, and graphite which is very soft solid which can be ground to be a very fine state. It is then used as a lubricant in those parts of machinery where oil cannot be applied. It fills up irregularity between the surfaces and hence reduces friction. Similarly, finely powdered talcum is used as lubricant. For example, we separate it on the carom board so as to reduce friction between the carom board and the coins. By using soap solutions are slippery in nature. They are used in reducing friction in high speed cutting and grinding machines so that only friction is reduced, but the heat produced during cutting or grinding is rapidly taken away by water present in the soap solution. Increasing friction. Friction can be increased by making surfaces rough or uneven. Examples of high friction is how it is increased are given below. Tires of vehicles have threads and soles of our shoes have grooves to increase friction. Roads are made rough to prevent slipping. The handles of cricket and tennis bats are made of rough materials to get a better grip. Spikes on the soles of shoes of mountaineers help to get a good grip on ice. Fluid friction. Gases of and liquids due to their nature to flow are together called fluids. When a solid moves in a liquid or a gas, the surface of the solid experiences friction. However, the force of friction between a solid and a liquid surface is lesser than that between two solids. The force of friction between a solid surface and a gas is lesser than that between a solid and a liquid surface. The frictional force exerted by fluids, liquids and gases is also called the drag. The frictional force of on an object in a fluid depends upon its speed with respect to the fluid, shape to the object and nature of the fluid. Do you know fluid friction is used a lot in water parks so we can move or slide down smoothly? Let us do. You have to do this, say whether friction is desirable and undesirable in the following cases. Do this activity. Revision time. Once again recall the chapter information. Friction always acts in the direction opposite to that of motion when two surfaces are in contact. Friction is important for many day-to-day activities. The force of friction is directly proportional to the weight of the body which moves. The force of friction depends upon the nature of a surface in contact. Friction is a necessary evil. On the basis of its nature, frictional force can be divided into three types. The types are static friction, sliding friction and rolling friction. Rolling friction is less than sliding friction. Friction can be reduced by using lubricants, ball or roller bearings, and by making the body of the object streamlined. Fluid friction is undesirable as it slows down the motion of objects. Yes children, प्रैक्टिस कीजिए एक्सरसाइजेस के थ्रू. एज यूजुअल आपको ओएमआर शीट दी गई है. करेक्ट ऑप्शन चूज कीजिए और डार्कन द सर्कल विद करेक्ट ऑप्शन इन द ओएमआर शीट. फिल इन द ब्लैंक्स. इन ब्लैंक्स को फिल कीजिए विद द हेल्प ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन गिवन इन चैप्टर. स्टेट टी फॉर ट्रू एंड एफ फॉर फॉल्स. आपको इन स्टेटमेंट के अगेंस्ट लिखना है कि कौन सी स्टेटमेंट ट्रू है, कौन सी फॉल्स है. वेरी शॉर्ट एंड लॉन्ग आंसर क्वेश्चंस को आप अपनी नोटबुक में मेंशन करेंगे. वेरी शॉर्ट विल बी इन 3-4 लाइन्स, शॉर्ट विल बी इन 4-5-6 लाइन्स एंड लॉन्ग आंसर्स विल बी इन डिटेल. डिस्क्राइब दैम थॉरली. एक्टिविटी टाइम. आपको 2 एक्टिविटी बोली गई हैं. ब्लॉक्स एक्टिविटी 1 इज 2 ब्लॉक्स आपने लेने हैं ऑफ आयरन ऑफ डिफरेंट masses आर kept on a cemented floor as shown in the given figures. Which one of them would require a larger force to move it from rest position? Reason देना है आपको इसके लिए. Give reason. Collect pictures of different types of tires used for different purposes. Give reason at least in 2 cases why a particular type of threading is used. For example, types of threading in bicycle tires, racing bikes and those used for cross country biking. Make a chart based on your findings. Homework is organize a visit a factory, a manufacturing unit that uses heavy machinery. Find out the different methods they use to reduce friction in the moving parts of the machinery and have fun. Bachcho, enjoy.
What they gon' do?